The White Hats and Ed Falcone have been in London all this week, meeting daily with key parties, interfacing with the House of Lords and UK agencies. Multiple agendas are in play at the highest levels. The White Hats are using the UK arena to commence their work due to the total control that the dark cabal, Bushes, Clintons, Obamas, and all of their minions, has had in the United States, including the American mainstream media. It is difficult to believe the Bushes have gone undetected for 50 years with a hidden agenda that is so deep they have compromised every American virtue.
So I hope the minute that's taken hasn't come off my time, please. My Lords, I'm going to start, I don't wish you to get too encouraged, I'm going to start with my conclusions, but I'm not going to sit down when I've made them, because I'm going then to give you the evidence to support them, and hopefully present to you the reasons why I want support for an official inquiry into the mischief I want to unfold to yourselves this afternoon. My Lords, I've been engaged in this pursuit of this issue for nearly 2 years now, and I'm no further through to getting to the truth. I think there are three possible conclusions which may come from it. I think there may have been a massive piece of money laundering committed by a major government which ought to know better, and that it has effectively undermined the integrity of a British bank, Royal Bank of Scotland, in doing so. The second alternative is that a major American department has an agency which has gone rogue on it because it has been wound up and has created a structure out of which they are seeking to get, well, at least 50 billion euros as a payoff. And the third possibility is that this is an extraordinary elaborate fraud which has not been carried out, but which has been prepared in order to provide a threat to one government or more if they don't pay them off. So there are three possibilities, and this all needs a very urgent review. My Lords, it starts in April and May of 2009 with the alleged transfer to the United Kingdom, to the HSBC, of a sum of $50 trillion, and 7 days later, ping, in comes another $50 trillion to the HSBC, and then 3 weeks later, another $50 trillion, total of $5 trillion in each case. Total of $15 trillion is alleged to have been passed into the hands of HSBC for onward transit to the Royal Bank of Scotland, and we need to look to where this came from and what the history of this money is, and I have been trying to sort out the sequence by which this money has been created and where it's come from for a long time. It starts off apparently as the property of a man called Johannes Riardi, who has some claims to be considered the richest man in the world. Well, he would be if all the money that was owed to him was paid, but I have seen accounts of his showing he owns $36 trillion in a bank, and it is a ridiculous sum of money. On the other hand, the $36 trillion would be consistent with the dynasty from which he comes and the fact that they have been effectively the emperors of Indochina in times gone by. But a lot of that money has been taken away from him with his consent by the American Treasury over the years for the specific purpose of helping to support the dollar. And he has sent to me a really quite remarkable document which is dated in February 2006, in which the American government have called him to a meeting with the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, which is neither Federal Reserve nor a bank. It's a bit like Celebrity Big Brother. It's got three names to describe it, and none of them are true. And this document, which is quite astonishing, purports to have been a meeting which is witnessed by Mr. Alan Greenspan, who signed for the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, of which he was chairman, as well as the real Federal Reserve Bank in Washington. And it is signed by Mr. Timothy Geithner, who as a witness on behalf of the International Monetary Fund, who sent two witnesses, the other one being Mr. Yusuke Horiguchi. And these gentlemen have signed as witnesses to the effect that this deal is a proper deal. There are a lot of other signatures on here. This is not a photocopy, this is an original version of the contract, under which the American Treasury have apparently got the Federal Reserve Bank of New York to offer to buy out the bonds which have been issued to Mr. Rayadi to replace the cash which has been taken from him over the previous 10 years. And they're giving him $500 million as a cash payment to buy out worthless bonds. Now, this is all in the agreement, and it's very remarkable. I would have thought establishing whether this is a correct piece of paper or not is just 2 phone calls away, one to Mr. Geithner and one to Mr. Greenspan, both of whom still prosper and live, so they could easily confirm whether they signed this. Mr. Rayadi has, by passing these bonds over, also put at the disposal of the US Treasury the entire asset backing which he was alleged to have for the 15 trillion. I now have a letter here from the Bank of Indonesia which says that the whole thing was a pack of lies, that he did not have the 750,000 tons of gold which was supposed to be backing it, he only had 700 tons. And this is really a piece of complete fabrication. Finally, I have a letter here from Mr. Rayadi himself, who tells me that he was put up to do this and none of it was true, and that he has been robbed of all his money. And I'm quite prepared to recognise that one of the possibilities here is that Mr. Rayadi is himself putting this together as a forgery in order to go and try and win some recovery back. But it gets more complicated than that, because each of the 5 trillion payments that came in has been acknowledged and receipted by the senior executives of HSBC, and again receipted by the executives of the Royal Bank of Scotland. And I have a set of the whole of those receipts for all of this money. Why would any bank want to sign £5 trillion worth, $5 trillion worth, 15 trillion in total, of receipts if the money didn't exist? The money was said to have come, first of all, from the Rayadi account to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York it was passed to JP Morgan Chase in New York for onward transit to London. The means of sending it was a SWIFT note, which ought to have been registered with the Bank of England if it was genuine. So when this happened and came about, I first of all took it to my noble friend Lord Strathclyde and said, what do we do with this? He said, give it to Lord Sassoon, he's the Treasury. So we did, and Lord Sassoon looked at it and said immediately, this is rubbish, it's far too much money, it will stick out like a sore thumb and you can't see it in the Royal Bank of Scotland accounts. Quite right. Secondly, he said, the gold backing it is ridiculous. There's only been 1,507 tons of gold mined in the history of the world, so you can't have 750,000 tons. This is true. And the third thing he said obviously was, it's a scam. And I agree with him, it was a scam. The problem is we stopped looking at that point. We should have asked, what is the scam, instead of at that time just nodding it off. And we have never really resolved this, because today I have this quite frightening piece of paper, which is my justification for bringing it into this meeting today, which is available on the internet, and I'm astonished that it hasn't already been unearthed by the Treasury, and every alarm bell in the land should be ringing if it has, because this is the General Audit Office of the Federal Reserve, the real Federal Reserve in Washington, and its audit review in end of July 2010 on the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. It has on it some 20 banks listed, to which $16.115 trillion are outstanding in loans. My lords, that is the sore thumb that was being looked for by Lord Sassoon. But more particularly, there are 2 other very interesting things with this. The first is that Barclays Bank have got 868 billion of loan. The Royal Bank of Scotland has got 541 billion, in which case one has to ask, as they could have earned in 3 weeks enough to pay off their entire indebtedness to the taxpayers in Britain, why they have not done so. Could we please ask them to put a cheque in the post tonight for the whole 46 billion? And the third thing that's wrong with it is that every bank on this list, without exception, is an MTN registered bank, which means that they are registered to use medium-term notes to move funds between themselves with an agreed profit share formula. In which case, these banks are investing this money, and most extraordinary, not a penny of interest does the Federal Bank of New York want paid on this vast amount of 16 trillion. Anyone amongst yourselves who knows what the IMF rules are will immediately smell a rat. Because the IMF has very strict rules for validating dodgy money. There are two ways of doing it. You either pass it through a major central bank, like the Bank of England, who had apparently refused to touch this, or alternatively, you put it through to a bank which is an MTN trading bank, and which is then able to use the funds on the overnight European MTN trading market, where they can earn between 1 and 2.5% profit per night, and the compound interest on that is huge. So there is a vast profit being made with this money somewhere, if it is in fact genuine. So, my lords, I believe that this is such an important issue now that I've put everything I've got on the subject into a 104 megabyte memory thumb, and I want the government to put this to some suitable investigative bureau and take everything I've got on the subject and find out what the truth is of what is going on here, because there is something very seriously wrong. Either we have a huge amount of tax uncollected on profits made, or we have a vast amount of money festering away in the European banking system which is not real money, in which case we need to take it back. My lords, I ask for an investigation, and please support my plea.
Monday, February 27, 2012. White Hats Report Number 37. The White Hats call for joint international criminal investigation. America demands its $15 trillion back. If you have been following the news, the White Hats have called for leadership in America to stand up and be counted. In fact, we would have expected our current president to stand up for America. We only asked for one person to stand up for America, for 308 million Americans, the old girl in the New York harbor, the tattered old flag, and the fine men and women that serve or have served our country proudly. Just one person that has the heart of a lion, willing to walk with a genuine swagger, and the intestinal fortitude to deal with very corrupt people in very corrupt situations. Amazingly, no one person has had the guts to answer the call, to call it like it is, to recognize and to expose the criminality and stand steadfast for truth, honesty and integrity as a human being, and for America's moral fiber to have a significant voice in the rapidly changing world we live in. The mockery Americans have had to endure for several decades is abysmal. We used to stand for all that was fair, moral and just. Due to the growth of the corruption that is out of control, the once good guys have been threatened, mocked, made fools of, and bribed to the point of not caring about America and her values, just barely willing to do their jobs, getting a paycheck and bribe money, without harassment. Not one person has had the ability to stand above the fray and say, I know about this and here is the truth, as ugly and nasty as it is. Not one person. The White Hats have been mocked at by the biggest in politics, starting with George H.W. Bush Sr., his son Dubia and his brothers Neil and Jebs. Blatant mockery. We have the evidence on all of them too. Then, Mitt Romney mocks in tune with George H.W. Bush Sr. because he committed fraudulent financial acts with George H.W. Bush Sr. and the theft of $700 million of Falcons money. We have the evidence on all of them too. Both Clinton's mockery with George H.W. Bush Sr., and Obama mockery with George H.W. Bush Sr., and in a remarkable admittance, Geithner mocked while stating he works for Bush and not Obama. Really? Did he just say what we reported? He works for Bush? We are sorry, we thought Obama appointed him. We must have missed all of the appointment stuff in high school government class, and then in college, and then in law school. Maybe this is what the problem has been all along. The White Hats have been under the impression, along with the rest of America and the world, that the cubic rent president appoints people to his cabinet and other appointed positions. Maybe that is the problem we misunderstood. Nah. Not for a minute. We have the evidence on all of them, and it is coming to America. So with George Sr. lurking in the background playing puppet master, Obama really has no control of the finances of America, which truly explains a lot. It would seem that, if Obama did have his fingers on America's checkbook, he would still have no control over the American economy, since Bush Sr. has total control. This is the exact reason why Obama himself, when personally requesting the $15 trillion be returned from the London bankers, was outright laughed at and summarily rejected. He came home with zero nada, which is why all of this has become so painfully obvious. Over to the United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom, the greatest ally America has ever had, there is a remarkably courageous, and extraordinary man named Lord James of Blackheath. We have all viewed the message Lord Blackheath provided to his fellow lords last Thursday, February 16, 2012, a day now referred to in the American inner circles as White Thursday. Most of us have viewed Lord Blackheath's address, which has been copied and pasted all over the internet with millions of views to date. We have all viewed his request for specific inquiries as directed by the Lords, to commence an immediate investigation into the ugly findings of 2 years' worth of analysis, complete with the delivery of gigabytes of documents to support his position, which is just the tip of the iceberg. Released from the House of Lords were further examples, which have protected certain dynamics, even sensitive papers, the sickening betrayal of, not only the British and American nations, but the world's banking system by the secretive cabal. Always, we balance the moral dichotomy with regard to consequences. We have made a formal request to Her Majesty's Government, HMG, the United Kingdom's Revenue Commissioners and MI6, to start investigating this forthwith. Embarrassingly, the United Kingdom intelligence agencies do not know what's going on in their own backyard, and on their watch. It is time for Great Britain to question their own intelligence agencies, and ask how a rogue group of Americans in leadership positions have circumvented virtually all of the established banking rules and regulations in the United Kingdom, the largest financial center in the world. The British now have the very difficult job of figuring out just how this fraud has been conducted, and what it means for the British and the EU markets. What we have difficulty with is that Obama does not control the finances of America, yet an outsider has the ability to heist $15 trillion from America and take it to another country surreptitiously, to hide it away. Attached as part of this White Hat report is an internal document from the United Kingdom, which is circulated to key parties integral to the investigation, and to the governing agencies. We have specifically not discussed all of the merits of the case as the document speaks for itself with exacting details of the fraud. In short, we do not have egos. Why believe us when you can get it from the source? Notwithstanding, we know each exacting detail, but we want you, the readership and the listeners, to understand the intricacy of this matter, the very sophistication required to defraud a whole world banking system unless, of course, the system was purposefully part of it. If that is the case, this whole matter just grew exponentially as the conspiracy is global and centers within, by, and through, the United States government. Of course, where else would the conspirators get the $15 trillion, and how would they get it out without congressional oversight approval? Someone needs to ask these very tough questions. Take your pick of the committees, there are dozens to choose from, that need to be involved in sorting all of this out. Back to the United States. We understand this is difficult to understand, and is far above the pay grade of most, so let us simplify the matter. This is 1,000 times the size of Watergate. Why? Simple. A group has stolen $15 trillion from the United States Department of Treasury, and the citizens of the United States of America, and has gone to extreme lengths to hide the transaction from the public and the American government, including congressional oversight committees, the government of Great Britain and the respective governments contained in the EU. As the investigation progresses, numerous countries will be asking the same question. What has occurred? What laws and regulations have been broken? What are we harboring? Banks will be questioned about all of the internal bank documents we possess, and have turned over to the House of Lords. Auditors will be questioned about the quality of their work product. We understand that insurance companies will have to pay out trillions of dollars in claims, if they can afford it, and do not file for bankruptcy protection first. Again, just like the derivatives problem, America is at the helm of financially destroying the world. Yet, no one has the guts to stand up and ask the tough questions. We have heard from several American agencies, which have viewed the same YouTube video of Lord Blackheath. All are very concerned about what is going to happen. Most have made statements to the effect that they know about certain things and they need help. Some have requested to come to our side, to expose what they know. In every case, all are very concerned about the repercussions for them and their families, just like we are careful to watch our backs. In the real world, if the white hats can get information, so can the parties that do not want these folks to speak, and frankly, they cannot be hidden away in some small town in America with a different identity. America wants its $15 trillion back in the coffers of the United States Department of Treasury. We have included for your review a copy of the actual Federal Reserve Bank SWIFT transmission sheet wherein the first $5 trillion was transferred to J.P. Morgan Chase for further credit. 2. Purevard Investments, Ltd. Please review the total document, but what is very interesting is that in the same box containing the further credit. 2. The third line states UN permit number and the homeland reference. This means that the transfer was an approved transfer by people within the United Nations and the Department of Homeland Security. This means there was a pre-approved authorization for the transfer of the funds. If this is true, then the conspiracy is far-reaching, and the perpetrators have significant experience in the Federal Reserve systems. There are only a few who have the authority in each of these organizations that have the ability to execute the instruction sets regarding the transfer of large amounts of funds. It is sort of like launching a nuclear missile in the movies. One guy has the key and one guy hits the button. Very few people have the credentials and/or authority. The net is going to get very small and tight. In the case of the transfer going through J.P. Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon, President and Chief Executive Officer, would have to have had personal knowledge and signatory control over the transfer. Therefore, we the White Hats demand the following. We call for the immediate resignation of the Secretary of the United States Department of Treasury, Mr. Timothy Geithner, who has acted with complicity while at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and is the Secretary of the Treasury, including this and numerous other transactions involved with illegally transferred or stolen funds. Further, we demand the members of the United States Congress to immediately and forthrightly direct its own body along with the applicable oversight and other directed committees, to immediately and independently investigate any and all activities regarding the persons comprising the conspiracy of the theft of $15 trillion by and through the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Further, we demand the members of the United States Congress to immediately and forthrightly direct its own body along with the applicable oversight and other directed committees, to immediately and independently investigate any and all activities regarding J.P. Morgan Chase Bank, Mr. Jamie Dimon, and any and all persons comprising the conspiracy of the theft of $15 trillion by and through the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Further, we demand the members of the United States Congress to immediately and forthrightly direct its own body along with the applicable oversight and other directed committees, to immediately and independently investigate the operations of the United States Department of Treasury and its relationship to the Federal Reserve System, wherein funds from the Department of Treasury and the use of the Federal Reserve System have colluded to act in a fraudulent manner. Further, we request the members of the United States Congress to immediately and forthrightly seek out an independent person of the highest possible caliber, credentials, integrity and credibility to be appointed, and specifically directed to lead the United States of America in the investigation, recovery and subsequent prosecution of any conspirator in the theft of $15 trillion belonging to the citizens of the United States of America. Since the leadership to date has not been able to find a person to accept this responsibility, we the White Hats will be glad to interview and recommend applicable parties for this endeavor. International cooperation. We, the combined multinational White Hats, hereby demand the calling and assemblage of a joint international task force including the United Kingdom and other independent affected countries, along with clean and untainted World Court representatives, to investigate the evidentiary materials submitted, to investigate the Federal Reserve System, and the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, amongst other persons and entities including former and current elected leadership of the United States of America, due to the conspiracy and fraudulent transfer of $15 trillion to the United Kingdom without oversight or approval. A note of importance to our readership. As we move through the process of rooting out the growing cancer that threatens to enslave all of humanity, we must stay vigilant to the task. In doing so, the more that is revealed, the more our information, reports and release of documents will become prevalent. At some point critical mass will be so strong, and our disclosures will become such common knowledge all over the world will be forced to clean up this mess without the Americans. The unfortunate concept is, America will not be in a moral position to be a significant voice in any of the world's leadership positions. Until that time, many will step forward to claim possession of knowledge and/or information we have released in order to further their own reputations. Reports, blogs, gurus, prognosticators and/or weekly internet contributors. Still others will weave stories and tales in an attempt to fill in blanks in the sequence of events that have been unfolding to fulfill their own prophetic storylines. Some of these pundits and so-called journalists may be well-meaning where others are not. This will all be revealed in the next few weeks and months. If anyone releases information and attributes it to the white hats, beware. If it is not posted on our site, then it is not coming from us, and should be discarded. Yet another group, with more dark and nefarious objectives, will attempt to confuse, obfuscate, distort and distract. They will attempt to accomplish this by printing articles and likely producing documents, to either discredit our work or lead the public on a false trail to nowhere. The process lends itself to distortion, as long as the mainstream media is controlled, owned, and operated by the cabal. They too will be exposed during this process. If you ever question whether it is ours, all roads lead back to our site. If it's not there, it's not from the white hats. For example, this past week, an internet article alleged the $15 trillion referenced in the House of Lords speech was lLOYD'S money. The same article referencing Lord James' courageous speech stated that the $27.5 trillion stolen from Wanda somehow included the $15 trillion. This is totally inaccurate. Further, rumors are circulating that a party to a 2011 federal lawsuit is somehow laying claim to the $15 trillion. This as well is not accurate either. Expect this type of disinformation to increase over the coming weeks and months. We have recently been deluged with feedback from readers inquiring how they can help and what they can do to further support our efforts. We have some suggestions to offer. Call your congressional representatives and inquire if they have heard Lord James' speech in the House of Lords on February 16, 2012.